Before we start this, it's important we talk about definitions, as low poly has an artistic definition and a technical definition. And, in addition to that, it's also the name of a growing art style, which does make things a little confusing. I want to make it clear, before the big professional 3D artists rearrange the topology of my face, that these are just my personal definitions. Ones that I would like to see used. I'll start with the technical definition. In games today, you will, during the development of a game with realistic or detailed graphics, make what is known as high poly models and low poly models. The high poly models consist of millions of polygons and contain all the little wrinkles, scratches and all those other little details you can see in games. Having done this, you will make the low poly model, which consists of far less polygons that overlaps the basic shape of the high poly model. After this is done, there's a process in which you take the details of the high poly assets and do a thing called baking. This is where you take the detail of the high poly models and convert them into materials and textures that can be used on low poly models that roughly has the same geometry. If you ever wondered why the leap from PS2 to PS3 era graphics was so noticeable, it was because of this process becoming commonplace and consoles becoming powerful enough to allow for more complex materials and lighting that could simulate light hitting the models with depths of shadow and specularity, as you can see here. To summarize, in the technical sense, the low poly in this instance is just the name of the model that consists of far fewer polygons than the high poly models and is intended to have these materials and textures applied to it, spending far less of a console's resources to render smaller, intricate details. And now for the art style I mentioned. I would describe it as a growing art trend involving untextured, decimated polygons, typically with vivid colors and detailed lighting, sometimes giving it a papercraft look. I really like this art style. I even made a DeviantArt group for it and have made some pieces myself, but what I don't like is its use of the low poly name, as it confuses things further. I've been calling it, and the group, polyart, because of this desire to separate it from the other low poly definitions. It also has an associated style that mimics papercraft that I like to call forigami, but I gotta stop making up definitions. Now the third definition that I call retro low poly. This is an art style in which you intentionally restrict the amount of polygons and the texture size in the materials to simulate old retro games. Now, where have I seen this before? Yes, it seems enough time has passed to the point we've gone beyond the SNES era of nostalgia and to the PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 era. The kids that grew up on Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, instead of 8 and 16-bit Mario and Sonic games, have gotten old enough to experience their own nostalgia. Now they can feel old, and some of us can feel even older. The similarities between retro low poly and pixel art might end there, as opinions on retro low poly are far more divided, I imagine. Pixel art, after all, is two-dimensional art and is closer to drawing or painting, just on a much smaller scale. It could be compared to mosaics or any other art form that uses square-based patterns. You're more likely to find an old mural or weave that resembles pixel art than you are to find an old Greek sculpture that resembles low poly art. However, what's interesting is how the texture resolution on the low poly models are so low that they actually start to resemble pixel art somewhat. This is often why I like to have point filtering over bilinear or trilinear filtering. If you look at this example using the original Half-Life, you can see point filtering and bilinear texture filtering. Such a low texture resolution, to me, it gives a sort of smudgy quality. I believe that in the old days this was used to hide the texture detail, and these games have long since passed the day where they were graphically impressive, so I prefer point texture filtering, which makes them stylistically interesting, in my opinion. I don't do this for everything though. I tend to prefer to keep the texture filtering in, say, Nintendo 64 games where it was clearly the intent. Retro low poly today draws inspiration from early 3D polygonal games. It's a style born from an era of technical restrictions. Machines simply weren't powerful enough to render anything better. They worked with what they had. I've often heard people criticize all these games for having poor visuals, that they're old and all simply look bad, while I'll argue it's art through adversity. Facing limitations is when people can be the most creative. That creativity is still intriguing and still brimming with potential in my opinion. To me, there's a difficult to describe charm about it. The attempts made back in those days, in graphics and gameplay, really can be described as experimental and sometimes innovative. It was a fascinating time and there wasn't much in the way of a foundation or standard. This of course led to a lot of failed experiments and poorly aged games, but many set the foundations we have now, and we might even see a similar thing with VR, as people try new aesthetics and gameplay to cater to that platform. Now, when it comes to retro low poly today, there are a lot of talented and inspired artists out there. You only have to look at this massive thread over at the Polycount forum. Hi guys. There are several DeviantArt groups, several big Tumblr accounts. Really, the only thing surprising to me is the lack of actual games that use this style. Outside of Strafe, I can't really think of any. And you'd think we'd see more given how people love Minecraft, which is as low poly as you get. But I hope to see more games use this style in future. And hey, if anybody wants it, I'm available for hire and commission work. Hello everyone, thank you for listening. This has been the first of one of these things, and I hope to do more in future. Hopefully better and less rambling, possibly. So yeah, comment and subscribe if you want to, and yeah, cheers!